You're right. Excellent. Okay. So let's jump in. I'm coming off of training this weekend, and I have to say that I'm just so motivated, excited, and passionate about the work that we as trauma therapists are doing. I think it's going to be an amazing year. I don't know what the world's going to look like, but I know as far as our work and our internal systems, we're going to be focusing a lot on parts and states this year, as well as polyvagal, because it's really important for us to know if we're IFS or ego state trained, what polyvagal energy our states or our parts are holding before we can make a decision as to how we're going to work with them. And so once again, I'm glad that this book is helping with your work. So let's move in. So I had a really good time with coming up with the visuals for this. I paid for a version of ChatGPT because I do like visuals, telling the ChatGPT what I would like according to what I'm learning. And it really helps me learn. And so I put a little bit of time and effort into that for this particular chapter, because like I said, I kind of struggled with this chapter. But let's just jump in and see where we end up going. So Stephen Porges, 1994 is when he introduced polyvagal theory. That's not that long ago. And so when we think about the DSM 4 or the DSM 3 in 1985 is when PTSD became a diagnosis. 1989 is when Francine Shapiro wrote her dissertation, and EMD, that's what it was called originally, was introduced in 1989. And then here we have 1994 is where Stephen first proposed polyvagal theory. When we get to this part of the book, I am going to like highlight it and make a big deal. But and our next chapters are going to be trauma and addiction, which is exciting. But Stephen literally apologizes to the trauma community for not realizing how instrumental this is going to be for us. And so I just think that's super cool, because it's not about accountability or anything. But when he was doing this, he originally went in and he was studying children, and he was studying their resiliency, and he was measuring their we're going to talk about this, their RSA and their heart rate variability, looking for patterns, and that's what scientists do, around how children could be more resilient, or what it is that feeds into their resiliency. And that's how he came across the polyvagal theory, and I'll talk a little bit about that when we get to that section. But not really realizing that, oh my gosh, this is going to be amazing for trauma therapists, because we're going to be able to connect that nervous system. We're going to be connecting the peripheral nervous system, peripheral nervous system, and the central nervous system. And these one of them houses the brain, which is going to be adaptive information processing, and then the other houses polyvagal theory, which is the body, and making that mind-body connection. It's what we've been missing. So all right, anyway, let me get going. So 1994, this is when polyvagal theory was introduced. And it traces our shift from an asocial reptilian ancestor to social mammals over hundreds of millions of years. And this is really fascinating, because when your client gets dysregulated and when they go into a shutdown, they're going back to a part of their brain that was in service of survival 500 million years ago. And so that's something that's really important for us to know, because there wasn't a whole lot going on back then, except for you either survived or you didn't. So what we've learned from evolution is this social engagement is hardwired and encoded in our physiology and our DNA for survival. So it is in service of survival. It's hardwired and it's encoded. And the older defensive responses versus the newer social responses are basically what we're working with as trauma therapists. That how crucial bonding and co-regulation is, and how when our clients go into a dorsal vagal shutdown, which is dissociation, which is what we see a lot of, they are literally being transported back 500 million years. I know that that sounds kind of dramatic, but at the end of the day, that's basically what's happening in our brain. And that the social engagement aspect of it, the need for social engagement and connection and attachment is hardwired. It is encoded. And so that's why when Gabermonte talks about attachment versus authenticity, we're talking about how we have to be in our attachment in order to survive, because that is what's hardwired. It's required. There are distinct vagal pathways. We've got two of them. We've got the older defensive response, which is going to be our dorsal vagal shutdown, and that's an unmyelinated communication between the body and the brain. And then we have the newer, more social engagement, which is going to be the dorsal vagal response, which is a myelinated ability to communicate, which just means that the neurons are able to travel up and down a lot faster. That bonding and co-regulation enhances resilience and well-being. So this isn't going to be something that we don't already know, but we're just going to be kind of honing in on it and going over and over and over it, because evolution, millions and millions and millions of years, we had reptiles transition into the mammalian time, which is like 250 to 200 million years ago. And it's really, like I said, it's hard to wrap your brain around, but this social engagement is necessary for survival. And that's what we see when we're studying evolution. That evolution, I don't like the word tinker, but that's what Stephen and Seth used. I like more like somebody who creates a sculpture. You're shaping and you're refining what's beneficial and adaptive across generations and generations and generations. So that's basically what we're seeing, and repurposing what it is that works and letting go of what doesn't work. That early vertebrates were slow and were able to downshift their entire bodies into conserving energy and playing dead. And at the end of the day, that conservation of energy is what our dorsal vagal shutdown engages in. So when you have a dissociative response, literally all of your organs are slowing down. Your ability to digest is basically not even available. Your heart rate drops significantly. Your blood pressure drops significantly. And the idea is we're conserving energy, yes, and because we're preparing to die, but also the playing dead. When you think about evolution, what works? Well, that worked because when you played dead, whatever it was that was about to eat you lost interest and walked away. And so that conservation of energy and that lethargic, feigning death piece stuck around for that reason. The cardio inhibitory fibers, I'm like, what? What's that? Clustered to form this wandering nerve. I'll explain this in a minute. Connecting the heart and multiple organs to the brain. So first of all, the cardio inhibitory fibers, we're talking about neurons. And we all know neurons that fire together, wire together. We got neurons in our brain. We got neurons traveling up and down our spine. We've got neurons that are sending through electric pulses messages to all of our organs. And all of that is going to be connected to our heart. It's going to be connected to our lungs, and it's going to be connected to our brain. And so the cardio inhibitory fibers is basically just looking at what it was that was connected to the heart and what was able to heal, let's say, the heart. I guess I'm trying to think of examples. Let's see here. So the ability to slow down heart rate, the ability to increase heart rate, and that connection with breathing and digestion. And once again, just transitioning out that word fibers and putting in neurons is also very helpful. The vagus nerve is called the wandering nerve. I believe that's what it stands for. And it's the longest nerve in the body, and it wanders. It wanders everywhere. It wanders, it connects the brain, like I said, to all the organs and to the heart, to the lungs. So there's a control hub in the brainstem. And when we think about the brain and how it's constructed, the brainstem literally goes back 500 million years. And that's where the original vagal signals came from. And the dorsal vagal is what evolved over time. So when you think about the brainstem and its ability to manage fight, flight, and its ability to manage like the metabolic demand, being able to control heart, being able to access the organs, being able to access breathing. All of that was controlled by the brainstem back very, very long time ago. And that as evolution has brought us to today, that it's the ventral vagal that has evolved, and that ventral vagal is going to be more around social connection and rest and digest. That the early vertebrates gained this ability to downshift. So that was, once again, that was the shift from 500 million to 250 million, that ability to manage danger and scarcity. So when we think about the types of things that, that dinosaurs had to endure, like food scarcity, drastic temperature changes, predators, that the evolutionary shift went toward this ability to downshift using a reduction in heart rate, using a reduction in blood pressure, and basically feigning death. And so the autonomic nervous system role in regulating these functions, such as heart rate, such as respiration, and such as digestion, evolved out of that. Now, one of the questions that I kept asking myself, and what I was really trying to understand, dinosaurs went from, and they were 500 million years ago. I'm going to go to the Field Museum in Chicago because now I think I can wrap my brain around this a little bit. And then moving into mammalian, which is 250 million years ago, they went from dinosaurs to little mouse-like moles, and I can't understand. I don't know what in your environment would shift such a large reptilian animal into something that's so small. And so that's where Stephen and Seth say at the very end of the chapter, well, we're not going to tell you why this happened. We're just going to tell you how this happened. And how this happened is through evolution. I can tell I must be using my hands when I teach because I'm raising my own hand. So from reptilians to mammals, there were early reptiles that evolved into countless species. Some developed social behaviors and some didn't. And so, like I said, the first mammals were small mouse-like creatures, which you would think wouldn't survive. But yes, they did, and yet they did survive. And once again, I need someone to tell me, how do you go from a dinosaur to a mouse? I still haven't figured that out yet. But at the end of the day, that is what it looked like. And that they were able to survive through the communication, through groups, through bonding, through teamwork, which gave the mammals a critical edge over predators. And so as that worked for them, that's how the brain started to wire itself. And like I said, that was going to be around 200 to 250 million years ago. And as we move into the mammalian brain, we're talking about the limbic system. We're talking about the amygdala. And we're starting to get ready to move into the neurocortex, which we'll get to. So mammals learn to downshift from constant defense to states of safety and trust. And with that is how the mammalian brain started to evolve. This innate capacity for social connection paved the way for communities, cultures, and modern human power. So once again, this long journey going from 500 million to today has been all about survival, and the survival has evolved out of the ability to be in connection through communities, through culture, and through how that's empowered humans. And the interesting thing is that one of the things that Seth is going to because he's a younger generation, he's going to take us to this space where we were very social, and we were all about one-on-one contact until the pandemic, and then how that's shifted and it's starting to change. And the question will be, what is that going to look like? So mammals repurpose their reptilian vagal fibers or neurons, right, for body calming and social closeness. So they started to shift, they started to change. And so the neurons moved from what was a dorsal, which was unmyelinated, to the ventral, which is myelinated. And unmyelinated, I tried to get a visual here. Unmyelinated is going to be like jumping over puddles as you try to walk down a sidewalk, whereas myelinated is very smooth, transition to get from here to here. And it goes a lot faster when you have myelination versus unmyelination. And so this, like I said, this is all happening during that mammalian gestation, 220 to 250 million years ago. The ventral vagal system manages both the physiological slowdown and the social engagement. So think about, we've got the dorsal vagal, that is a dorsal vagal shutdown, all right, where the client, or where we've got a feigning of death. But now we also have the dorsal vagal that can slow down the client, which is different, slowing down for rest and relaxation and social engagement in order to bring the client into connection and co-regulation. So mammals signal safety through voice tone, facial expressions, posture, and enhancing social approachability. So the tone of voice, when we think about Daniel Siegel, and there's video we show in our basic training talking about how tone of voice is really important, that if you are within a normal range, or I should say a secure range, that you have the ability for the, if it's an animal or if it's a human, their ability to hear. And if they're in a different part of the brain, if they're more, let's say, if they're in their sympathetic fight flight, that they're only hearing high tones and very low tones, because those are going to be where the danger are. And so it makes a difference as to where your client is, because when you're in listening to high tones and low tones, you are not distracted. And you're not distracted when you're listening to voices either, but you're hyper alert to danger when you're listening for very specific, and I'm trying to think of the language that I'm with tones, if it's vibrations, or I don't know, I'm forgetting, unfortunately. But facial expressions, and then the body language, which is going to be posture, it's going to be intensity. Are you approachable or not? Basically is what we're looking at. Eric, do you know what I'm referring to when I'm trying to define tone? There's a word I'm missing.
Well, I'm thinking of the number of words, but there's a tonality, a tonal quality. Um,
Okay.
you're talking about the vocal range that, like, you can tell when somebody's ready to squeak because they're squeaking, all of that stuff. Their pace of speech, all of that. I'll see if I can find it.
Okay. I'm thinking more around
Frequency,
wavelengths, but
frequency.
I don't think that's the language.
It's
Yeah.
frequency, Paula.
Frequency. Okay. So
That's
yes,
what
because there,
is
thank you.
the
Thank you.
higher or lower pitch. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Cynthia. That's it. Because I know that Disney music that's exactly the word I'm looking for. Disney music is within a certain frequency, and that the frequency of the high tones and the low tones are going to be very different. And that if a client, or if a client or an animal is in their sympathetic nervous system, where they're in a fight flight, their ears are set to hear higher and lower frequencies, as opposed to when they're in their ventral vagal. Thank you. I should have said, hey, Cynthia. Okay. All right, great. And then once again, I really want to kind of hone in on this idea of myelination, because unmyelinated versus myelinated, that was a huge transition. Going from unmyelinated, which is a really slow movement of information throughout our body, to myelinated, which is a super fast transition of information throughout our body. And then what is the social engagement system? Let's look at a definition. The social engagement system is a neural network linking facial muscles, vocal control, and hearing with the heart. So it's coordinating those emotional expressions and the perception of a safety and threat. And so that's, it involves neural networks. The neural networks are around hearing with the heart, hearing with the vocal, hearing with the facial expressions. and it's central to how we connect with others. When we think about open facial expressions, and the vocal calming allows those facial expressions, and it modulating tone, voice, and attentive hearing. It's key to bonding and safety. And so if you're coming from an environment where there's a lot of like yelling, for example, that is going to keep you out of your social engagement system, because it's not allowing you to be in a calm space. And so we've got a lot of environments that are not necessarily conducive to safety. Moving once again through the development, going into reptilian, from reptilian into mammalian, synchronized sucking, swallowing, breathing, and vocalizing in infants is crucial for survival and predicts future well-being. So once again, trying to ask the question, like, why did this happen? There's really no answer to that, at least that I could find, but the question is how it happened. And this is how we moved from our brainstem 500 million years ago, our dorsal vagal shutdown, to what is today in our neurocortex. It's the development of what was necessary in order to survive. The stress and defense states down regulate the social engagement. So you're going to move out of social engagement and into the states that you need to be in order to deal with whatever that external environment is looking like. So reducing our ability to send or receive safety cues and potential contributes to various clinical symptoms. At the end of the day, if we're not in our dorsal vagal, we cannot express with our faces. We cannot express with our tone of voice. You hear people talk about certain facial expressions and how it can send a message down your spine. We're not able to engage in the social the social engagement system unless we are in that polyvagal state. And so once again, thinking about our clients, and we're teaching our clients how to talk about when they're in green, when they're in yellow, and when they're in red. And if they're in yellow or red, they're not able to engage in these facial expressions and these tone of voices that are the safety cues that are necessary to be in connection with people and to be in connection with themselves, actually. I mean, we haven't even made the connection, the parts work here. So once again, our social engagement as an intervention, polyvagal theory is highlighting how facial expressions and vocalizations shift the body from defense to safety. And so when we're doing work with our clients, and like I love to work with adolescents, and I have them doing like polyvagal playlists. I have them doing showing me videos that can shift them from defense to safety. Laughter is a great way to move into safety. Working with pets is a great way to move into safety. So what is important for us as therapists is figuring out how to shift from defense to safety, and then honoring that fact that the defense systems are super old. It's almost like they're ancient and we need to respect them because they've been around for so long. I mean, it's kind of fascinating when you think about the idea that when your client dissociates, they're literally engaging in what it was like to be in an environment 50 million years ago. And so when you think about it that way, it's a big shift to go from there to where we need to be now. And so that's why I'm appreciating this chapter, even though I'm not feeling super, super comfortable on my ability to present on it, because I really struggle with evolution to begin with. So while devices can target the vagus nerve, natural activities like talking, singing, praying, breathing, exercise also engage it. And so you can find many different types of environments. There's a place down at Northwestern, right down the street from me, that will put in devices that stimulate the dorsal vagal, and it's electric pulses, and it stimulates those pathways, and many people find them to be helpful. So I also know people that have found them not to be helpful. I mean, at the end of the day, trauma work seems to be what's the most helpful. But also I do a lot of addiction work, and so fellowships are a big one. Luckily, our 12-step groups take anything from people that are in debt to people that were ritually abused. You can pretty much find a fellowship in about anything. And that's going to be a big piece of that social engagement. Immersing ourselves in safe social settings promotes a regulated autonomic state, enhancing that well-being and sense of fulfillment. Once again, that's where if we can find groups of people, if we can join a choir, if we can, we want to be working with our clients, figuring out if it's yoga, where they can feel part of a group, because that social engagement is so important. Mammals evolved, evolved, and they're, sorry, let me move this for a minute. It seems to be blocking. There we go. Okay. Mammals evolved specialized mechanisms for seeking and signaling safety in an unsafe world. So ancient adaptations were repurposed in manuals, kind of a review what we're talking about so far. So you've got that evolution. Once again, you're coming from that dinosaur to that small resourceful mammal, which was a mouse or a vole, to our human beings, where we've evolved from our brainstem to our limbic system, where there's going to be emotions, and then we've moved into our neurocortex, which is going to be about this social connection, social beings. Interestingly enough, and the only reason why I threw this picture in here, birds were not part of that transition. Birds kind of had their own evolutionary path. So since we're talking about evolution, we might as well throw that in there. Examining the brains of the reptiles and the mammals is a lot of what Stephen did. And that was able to show him how the structures shifted and changed, and what made reptiles become mammalian. And once again, that's what we're talking about when we're talking about polyvagal theory. How these findings support Stephen Porges's theory. So, he came up with his theory. He was interested in heart rate variability. He went back and looked at evolution, was able to find that transition from 500 million years ago all the way to today. He's able to see the progression and how the polyvagal theory came about. And that's super cool. So that's why I'm doing my best to honor this chapter. This is an example of the evolution of the brain. Okay, and so here's our reptilian brain and our brain stem. Once again, I just came off a training, and Eric, I think I'm going to take a breath here after this slide to see if there's any questions or comments coming up, because maybe people are more understanding of this section than I am. But the training that I worked at this weekend, we were using Jim Knight's back of the head scale in order to give our clients the ability to measure their dorsal vagal shutdown, being dissociation. And we say that when you're here in the back of the head, that the client is not in the room with us, that the client is in the memory, and that they are dissociative, but that we can measure it and have the client show us where they are when we're doing the work with them. And so you would say, can you do the back of the head scale for me right now and show me where you are? And we would want the client to show us like, well, I'm about here, which means I'm here in the room with you and I'm in the memory. And I just love the fact that it's a 0 to 10 scale, 10 being I'm completely present with you, and 0 being I'm not here at all. And yet what we're putting our hand on is the brainstem. So I feel like that's kind of cool, because that's 500 million years ago. Maybe this is 250 million years ago. And then this is today. This is us being in connection with our therapist, being in the room, being in dual attention. And so I just, because we were just working on that over the weekend. I thought that was interesting. So you've got the brainstem here in the back, and then you've the back of the head, and that's going to be our 500 million years ago reptilian brain. Then we go into the limbic system, which is our mammalian, which is our 250 million years ago. And then what we have is our neurocortex. This is where our prefrontal cortex is housed. And housing our prefrontal cortex is where our higher order thinking is, higher order thinking and reasoning. This is where problem solving is. This is where language is going to be. This is the key to the work that we're doing with our clients as we bring them, if we're doing it through parts, if we're doing it through ego states, if we're utilizing negative and positive beliefs and cognitions in our EMDR, this is what we're doing. We're connecting our prefrontal cortex we're link binder connecting our prefrontal cortex with information that is housed in the mammalian actually the mammalian brain is where it is. If we go into the brain stem, then we need to pull the client back out before we can do the work that we need to do. So we want to be able to see how our anatomy has evolved and how that really fits into the work that we're doing. And once again, it suggests how freaking powerful this is, right? Like, I still can't wrap my brain. I'm a numbers person. 500 million years ago, and the dinosaurs are running around, and that's where majority of our clients are, right? Dissociation is off the charts. It's the third most prevalent symptom out there, next to anxiety, depression, and depersonalization. So you literally have a dinosaur in your room. I wouldn't say that to my client, but that changes things a little bit, because it gives us an idea of how powerful this is, and how through evolution, we therapists, I mean, that's amazing, because we're going to be the ones that are going to travel them through time and bring them to present day social engagement. So anyway, this was the slide that really hit home for me, observing the how and not the why. And I'm like, okay, now you tell me that, because I'm still trying to figure out dinosaur mouse. Like, that just doesn't do it for me, right? But anyway, okay. So Eric, is there anything coming up in the chat that?
Yeah, were you going to take that breath? I was just.
Yeah, I know, right.
No, there are not a lot of questions coming up that
Good.
prosody. I actually went and looked up the term prosody. It is see, prosody is the pace and rhythm of speech. For instance, in poetry. So we're all good there, but I wanted to make sure that you take that breath so that we can get you to chapter 5. Okay.
Yeah.
If he has any questions now, go ahead and unmute and just chime in. But I think we're all pretty good. Porges is just laying out the pattern in this chapter. So
right, and he's really honoring the fact that scientifically we can see the how, and then he literally says, and the why is harder. And I'm like, yeah, like no fig shaped, like dinosaur mouse. I still can't get over that. That's why I want to go to the Field Museum. They have the most amazing, like, you can walk through and watch how through time, going back to, I can't even say it, plankton, I don't know, all the way to where we are today. So that'll be my treat for myself after this chapter. So here's the evolution of our brain. And neurobiology is the key to us therapists and sharing with our clients a true understanding as to what's going on. We want to empower our clients with knowledge. We want them to be able to feel safe and secure, because there is a reason. There's a rhythm to this madness, and that there's a path that we're on. And once again, to just really honor like how powerful it is. So this is our reptilian. And so we've got typical aggression and dominance. And this is our, like our back of the head back here. And then this is our limbic system and the paleomammalian. I've got some new vocabulary words. Hope I don't have to say them too much. But this is where you're going to be engaging in emotions and starting to involve yourself with what needs to be more social engagement, reproductive behavior, looking at parental behavior and attachment, and then moving into our neo-mammalian complex, where the language, abstraction, planning, perception, reasoning, logic, what's going on here is amazing. When we see pictures of aliens, we see a very large frontal forehead, and that's because they are anticipating that throughout our as evolution moves forward, that we're just going to be growing and growing and growing this area of the brain. And I'm not sure if that's true because we've got a lot of trauma, and I don't know how that works, but we'll see. So we're looking at no single trigger can explain the complex journey from reptile-like ancestors to fully social mammals. But one of the things we can put language to is the severe temperature changes. Once again, why I'm excited to go to the Field Museum. This movement toward maternal care, this need for group defenses, working together. I love the picture of the elephants, needing new food sources, that all of this just gradually steers us toward this mammalian society. And that works. That works. So now we're going to get into really where Stephen started. So Stephen started with heart rate variability. He then, as the polyvagal theory evolved for him, he then went back and did the research to find this through evolution. Heart rate variability is literally the measurement of how your heart rate increases and decreases, and also the respiratory sinus pronounce it arrhythmia. Thank you. The RSA, just call it. Both of these are going to be ways that you can calculate the movement of your heart rate according to breath, right? So the variations of heart rate and what happens as you breathe. When you inhale, your heart rate speeds up. When you exhale, your heart rate slows down. We use a longer exhale when we're activating that ventral vagal. When we're in our trainings, the language I use is inhale in, longer exhale out. So we want to be activating that parasympathetic social engagement system. And we can do that through breath work. I think a lot of you probably know the power that comes with breath work. So what Stephen was doing when he came across polyvagal theory was literally measuring heart rate variability and the RSA to predict resiliency in children. And I think it was babies, actually. But an example would be if you took two children, and I know there was a lot of research that was done with 9/11, but you took two children and you activated them and you watch their heart rates go up, and then you measure how their heart rate comes down. You measure it according to like breath work, but you also measure the speed at which the heart rate's coming back down to resting. And that's going to be the heart rate variability. But what he noticed is the heart rate kept going down. And the heart rate kept going down for the clients that had complex trauma. So, for example, when we think of 9/11 and all the research that's done with the children that came out of that, the ones that had a good enough attachment, the ones that had a good enough family system, they actually, their heart rate came down and it stopped at resting. But for the children that came from a complex trauma background, their heart rate continued to drop and it went below resting. And that's why we've shifted from window of tolerance and Daniel Siegel, hyper and hypoarousal, to polyvagal. Because at the end of the day, you need to get activated first and your heart rate needs to go up before it drops. And when it drops into a completely new and different state. And we used to say, fight, flight, freeze, fawn, and fight, flight, freeze, fawn. It encapsulates both the increased heart rate and the reduced heart rate. And now that we know this, hence Stephen Porges in 1995, I think it was, now we have language for increased heart rate, sympathetic nervous system, hyperarousal, fight, flight, fawn, and hypoarousal, a lower than resting heart rate. We have a drop in blood pressure. We have the conservation of resources and energy, and that we call flop and drop, feigning death, playing dead, because the mammal is anticipating death. And so that's where polyvagal has become really important. And it all came out of this work that Stephen was doing with children and looking at their resiliency. So I don't know if there's any questions on that. That gave me a lot of clarity, to be honest with you. Anything coming up, Eric?
No, there is a little line on the top of your screen right now.
Oh, yeah, oh, that's been there a long time. The meeting is being recorded. Okay, so then our RSA, let me go back and pronounce it correctly. Respiratory sinus arrhythmia, got it. Respiratory sinus arrhythmia, is considered normal and healthy. And that, what is that? Showing how the heart rate varies with breathing when moving from one state to another. So if you're looking at a client that moves into a sympathetic state and you're monitoring their heart rate and you're monitoring their breath work, that's where the RSA is going to be important. Where the heart rate variability is literally just going to be how the heart rate increases and then how long it takes. And I don't quote me on this, but the measurement is more around the movement of the heart rate going from a higher to a lower. And at the end of the day, we're looking at, like, I have a client that has a heartbeat range of 150 down as low as 50, and her resting rate is 75. When she's at 150, she's in her sympathetic fight, flight, fawn. And when she's at 50, she has dropped into that parasympathetic dorsal vagal unmyelinated shutdown, right? Where her heart rate has dropped considerably because she's playing dead, basically. That's where it comes from. Flop and drop. That's where our clients are lethargic and they're depressed and they feel helpless and they feel hopeless. And holy cow, like, if we can teach our clients that this is where this comes from and look at how cool and powerful this is, we can start changing the language and we can give our clients, we can empower them, like I said, with the knowledge. And also, half of change is acknowledgement. And so we can start looking at, we need to get ourselves into today and honor the 50 million years ago coping strategies. And then also Daniel Siegel's Name It to Tame It. We're putting language to the experience. You know, when you shut down and go into a dissociation, this has been around for millions of years. This is a really empowering, powerful coping strategy that we want to honor. And so just putting language to it, as well as the psychoeducation. Daniel Siegel talks about Name It to Tame It and how neurotransmitters literally are put upon the amygdala to calm it down. Okay, I'm getting off topic though. So, and I do need to transition into chapter 5 very quickly here. So measuring vagal tone with the heart rate variability and the respiratory sinus arrhythmia tells us how one's heartbeat is aligning with breathing. And I wouldn't run out and plan on starting to do this with our clients, but just know that this is what Stephen was doing. This is what was evolved out of 1995. That non-invasive metrics reveal real-time vagal tone. And at the end of the day, vagal tone is something that we are constantly trying to strengthen and enhance with our clients. We want to increase their vagal tone, which means their ability to shift in and out of states in a healthy way. Okay, we're moving into chapter 5. So, any comments, thoughts, not questions?
Cynthia,
That's the best I can do.
do you mind just commenting on what you
Yeah.
just out? Because I'm just commenting that that's a really great comment. And Paula's just interrupting herself. Could you say that, what you just
Sure. Yeah, Paul, I was just thinking about the power of having some amount of understanding, about um the connection between why am I functioning like this? I can't get off the couch, I can't get out of bed. But if we understand, again, maybe not to our clients, if they understand, maybe not to the degree of reading this book, but they
Right.
have some basic understanding, it can tremendously reduce shame.
Mm-hmm.
Because then it's like, now this makes sense. What I'm experiencing makes sense. I didn't invent this system. You didn't invent this system. This is how it works. Having some kind of understanding, I think really can shift the narrative.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. And especially being in the Chicagoland area and having a really amazing exhibit down at the the Field Museum that literally shows how this evolved, I think is going to be really empowering for people that are in my area. But you're absolutely right. And it basically encapsulates everything,
yeah.
right? Yeah, I so agree.
Is a
Oh,
There is a comment. Could you repeat the hyper to hypo drop, or hypo to hyper drop into regulation?
Yeah.
Put the chart out, but
Yeah. So basically, and I was using my client as an example, but you've got a resting rate. Everybody has a resting rate. You can generally find it when you wake up in the morning. And when you move into a sympathetic nervous system state, and Eric, you could put that chart, the trauma response chart in the chat, you move into a higher heart rate, and that's our hyper aroused state. And that's going to be our fight. That's going to be our flight. That's going to be our fawning, where we're codependent. And then if the danger doesn't go away, and what this is our mobilized state to work with danger, if it doesn't go away, we see a significant drop in the heart rate, and we move into that hypo aroused state. And now you've got a heart rate that's, you know, significantly below the resting rate. And that's because the brain is conserving energy and conserving resources. And when you've done that, both of these states, you can't access your thinking or your problem solving brain. Your thinking and problem solving brain, the social engagement system that we're going to be talking about now in chapter 5, is here at resting. And so, like, you know, Cynthia was saying, to empower our clients to truly understand that our heart rates go up for us to, you know, and there's a whole neurobiological piece where there's cortisol and adrenaline that's released that empowers us and gives us energy and mobilizes us into the fight flight. But if that danger doesn't go away, and the pandemic is a perfect example, you're going to shift into what feels numb, what feels lethargic, what feels like a shutdown, because you are playing dead. That's where it came from, is the reptiles that needed to play dead in order to survive. So I hope that that gives some clarity there. Okay, good. So let's move into, I want to honor chapter 5. Once again, had a great time with the visuals. My daughter played Sims all the time. And you can tell that Seth Porges is a video game player because he really had fun in this chapter. And I totally skipped over the video game stuff. But I did put the Sims up because I so remember my daughter would say, oh my gosh, they're dying because they're not socializing enough. You know, my daughter had reptiles in her room. She had a turtle. She had a lizard. She had, you know, all kinds of reptiles. And I think that that's how she was living in her in her brain stem, because we had a lot going on in that house in those days. Poor kids. But she played this game all the time, and there would be alerts that would go off, and she'd literally have to send her sim off to a party, which is just riot, or invite somebody over. And I remember her complaining about it. She's like, I don't understand why I have to have people over. Like, you know, I got other things to do. So anyway, so this picture shows a scene from a video game called The Sims. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, where characters show different emotions based on their based on the polyvagal theory. This theory explained how our body reacts to stress and safety. And so in this scene, you've got a character that looks anxious and upset. They're in their sympathetic nervous system. You've got another scene where the character looks withdrawn. That's going to be your dorsal vagal shutdown. And then you have a third one that's calm and interacting, and that's going to be our ventral vagal. So now we've basically touched base on all aspects of polyvagal theory. And yay, there's only 3, right? We use the traffic light once again. And when you are in that sympathetic, activated stress, yellow is what we use the traffic light. When you are in your shutdown, your dorsal vagal shutdown, that's red. And when you are in that social engagement, that's green. And so we teach our clients, and Eric, maybe you can put some of those resources in the chat. We teach our clients according to red, yellow, green, because that's just super easy for them to have language. And our goal is to start teaching them about social engagement in order to survive, because that's where the connectiveness and the co-regulation is. So social interaction, this chapter is so much easier. Co-regulation helps our body send and receive safety signals. It's crucial for regulating our nervous system. And so, once again, had a lot of fun with the pictures here. We naturally pick up on and mirror the emotional states of those around us, enhancing our own sense of safety. Can a client do this if they didn't get attunement, mirroring, reflective listening in their attachment? Because they can't. And at the end of the day, we need to build and grow this vagus nerve, right? We're learning about, once again, the evolution and how to co-regulate and move into social engagement is through facial expressions, tone of voice, body intensity, eye contact, right? Being around people who make us feel safe soothes our nervous system, which in turn soothes the clients, creating a positive feedback loop. So once again, we're speaking to being in fellowships, being in social environments, whatever it is that your client enjoys. One thing I love about Chicago, I've never seen so many people at a frickin' doodle coffee. A doodle coffee is where you bring your labradoodle or your retriever doodle or whatever your doodle is and your coffee. And you see a bunch of 20 somethings sitting around with their Starbucks and their perfectly beautiful non-shedding doodles. And so you can find anything as far as finding the people that you need to connect with. It's hilarious. And I love that. I think that's great. And once again, that's a big piece of what we need to do. That according to the polyvagal theory, co-regulation through social behavior is as fundamental as our need for food and sleep, deeply ingrained in our DNA. And that's going to be our biological, how we biologically gravitate toward attachment. I'm so much more comfortable presenting in this section. I can feel it. So we biologically need that attachment. And when Gabermonte talks about attachment versus authenticity, and when, shoot, I'm going to forget her name. Oh, or maybe it's his name. Anyway, it's a trauma book I read during my training with ISSTD that talked about how attachment is about survival and how our traumatized clients literally were so engaged in trying to survive and stay alive that they didn't have any time for authenticity. They had to sacrifice anything that was authentic because their need for their attachment needs to be fulfilled generally meant that they had to appease their abusive parents or their perpetrator. And once again, if we're talking about complex trauma, we're talking about kiddos that needed to figure out how to get their needs met because it's biological, right? It's ingrained in what our needs are at birth. Co-regulation maintains our body balance and is vital to our challenging world. And without safe and positive social interactions, it's difficult to achieve health, happiness, and clear thinking. Once again, a great way to create psychoeducation for our clients. We're going to talk about red, and we're going to honor red. We're going to spend a lot of time with red. If you do a DES, which I hope all of you do, color-coded DES, everything on the DS is going to be in red. If you eventually end up doing a multi-dimensional inventory of dissociation, it's all about red. Now we're talking about how dinosaurs are red. I mean, we've got a lot that we can do to honor red, which is going to be that dorsal vagal shutdown. And we have a lot that we can talk about with the sympathetic nervous system, the fight, flight, fawn, because that's what everybody's always talked about. You've gone into your fight, flight, taking the word freeze out, and you're mobilized and you're pissed off and you can't even drive down the road without getting pissed off. So red and yellow, we've got a lot done there. But green, this is our where we're co-connected and co-regulated. This is where the psychoeducation is going to come in. And this is the first place we want to start is with teaching them about what green is, why it's there, where it came from. When we talk about motivational interviewing and we need to motivate our clients into from pre-contemplation stage of change into contemplation stage of change. And you need your clients to contemplate being in green. Green is not something they're interested in. It is not safe. It is not secure to be in green. We need to, to move from pre-contemplation to contemplation, of course, there's going to be polarized parts work, but there's also psychoeducation and looking at values. And the psychoeducation is right here in front of us. Face-to-face, initiating with direct visual contact, crucial for activating the ventral vagal system that controls facial expressions of safety. But what exactly happens when you have a traumatized client? Because eye contact can be the complete opposite. It can be, activate a shame response. It can make our clients uncomfortable. There could be, and that's because they're not in green. So if I'm with a client and I'm making eye contact and they're looking away, they're not in their green zone. They're not in their co-regulated state. They are probably in a ventral dorsal vagal shutdown. They're in red. See, this is why I like to use the colors, because the language can drive you crazy. So it's not about, oh, I'm in green and they're not making eye contact. It's that they're not in green. And so that, once again, is really helpful psychoeducation. You can't be in green or maybe let me do it this way. You can't be in red and make eye contact. You can't be in red and be in a social connection like we're seeing here in this picture. So the facial muscles express emotions vividly in safe states, unlike the flat effect that's in a defensive state. So once again, you can't pretend to smile and be happy. You can't activate the appropriate nerves that work the facial muscles that bring connection if you're not in that state, because you're in a different state that's focusing on something different. All right. And once again, the voice is a big piece of this. Our voice gains prosody, moving from monotone to melodious, signaling safety and welcome. So what does that sound like? Because we all know that we have clients, younger clients, that come from homes where there's a lot of yelling, and they're not necessarily getting having the ability to move into green because they don't have the environment for it. Once again, great psychoeducation. As one person registers safety, the other does too, creating a cycle of mutual soothing and safety. Once again, like, are our kids feeling safe in school? Is there safety in a classroom, right? Are our kids able to be in green where they need to be in order to truly absorb the content that's being taught? That's a good question. Historically, face-to-face interactions are vital for survival through cooperation in a dangerous world. Once again, looking at that evolutionary shift, moving from 500 million years ago to today, and how in order to activate those necessary mechanisms that promote social engagement, that we need to then engage in energy and social environments and face-to-face contact that is feeling safe and secure. In fact, safety is our intervention when we start working with our trauma clients. And that comes directly from Rebecca Case and Polyvagal Informed EMDR. We need to start with safety. And our clients don't like safety. In fact, we don't even use the word safe a lot of the times because it can be activating for our clients. We use the word secure, right? Let's see here. Historically, face-to-face interactions was vital for survival through cooperation in a dangerous world. Once again, I think I just read that. That has to do with evolution. And today's technology, now this is where we're going to move into a little bit of a conversation. See how we're doing on time. Today's technology allows for remote interactions, which differs from the historical survival-driven communication. So though it still plays a critical role. So in other words, when we were experiencing the pandemic, even though we couldn't be together, I know a lot of families that had like Zoom calls on like Sunday. My niece had a Zoom baby shower because she was pregnant during the pandemic. So we've got ways to fulfill, and we're going to talk about how this has kind of replaced a lot of our face-to-face connection. But we've got ways that through technology that allows us to get some of these needs met. Evolution tells us about the survival of the fittest, that the move toward being gentle, emphasizing survival through cooperation and not just competition. So as we've moved into working with our neurocortex, we're moving toward how that relationship and that engagement with an appropriate communication, but also not only gentle with others, but even more important, and as far as I'm concerned, gentle with ourselves. And that's where the parts work is going to come in, right? We've got our internal family systems or our ego states, or we have structural dissociation, or we have our Jungian, or we have our Gestalt therapy. We have so many ways that we can work with our clients around how can we start being gentle with ourselves. Humans have evolved mechanisms to transition from aggression, from our fight, flight, or even further back to our dorsal vagal shutdown, to cooperation and enhancing sociability. And that is a big piece of what we are doing as therapists, helping our clients. If you are working on, cooperation within a bunch of self states, or if you're looking at cooperation as a higher self leader, working with internal family system parts, at the end of the day, it's all the same thing. And how is that being taught? How is that being mentored? That's being mentored by us as the therapists. This evolutionary trait has played a role in the human domestication of animals like dogs and horses. I love how they put dogs and horses. I think in the book they even had cows, which I thought was interesting. And goats also. Engaging in social interaction rewards us with health and happiness, while neglecting them leads to illness and depression. And so, in the 12-step rooms, we talk about how addiction is in isolation and recovery is in community. And basically, that's, exactly what we're saying here. That strong social networks are linked to better health, happiness, and longevity. That long-term social isolation can be harmful, as physical torture, evidenced by mental health crises seen during prolonged periods like the pandemic, really took a toll on our clients, on people in general. We're seeing a lot of symptoms coming out of the pandemic that affected our younger folks, that affected our older folks. I just know from my personal experience, my mother, who was in her 80s, was driving, playing tennis, and was very active before the pandemic, 2 years locked in her apartment, and now she lost all of her abilities. So it really took its toll on different age groups in different ways. Long-term, just read that. Historically and even today, face-to-face interactions is crucial for fulfilling our social needs, as it engages complex neurobiological processes of co-regulation that promote well-being. Think about it with the face-to-face interactions. We want to think about what it is that's happening for our clients. I think of off the top of my head, and my client is absolutely okay with me sharing this. When I put on my mom face with my mom voice, she actually goes into non-epileptic seizures because she was abused by her mother. And her mother used that tone of voice and used her connection, her maternal connection, in order to then move into abusing my client. So, these are really important aspects of the work that we're doing that's all nonverbal. Cranial nerves link directly to our capacity for facial expression. So cranial nerves connected to facial expression is cranial nerve number 7. I don't know if I have the cranial nerve dude. I think I do. Let me pull them up in a minute. Different cranial nerves have different effects. And the vagus nerve is part of the 12 cranial nerves. And so let's see, a significant portion of our nervous system is dedicated to managing social interaction through our facial and vocal features. And let's see what that looks like. I love this because it shows where the nerves show up in our face. But number 7 is going to be all of our facial muscles. Number 5 is going to be part of vocal. And where's our vagus nerve? Here's our vagus nerve, number 10. And that's going to be the longest nerve in the body. And at the end of the day, I love this because you can find where all the nerves, this is the number 7 right here. If you're looking for optic nerves, you can find them here. The number 3, the oculomotor, also has a lot to do with facial expressions. We do a lot with like our eyebrows and our forehead. So it's kind of cool. You've got your acoustic. So here you've got a lot going on when it comes to tone reciprocity. And when Daniel Siegel talks about our nonverbal communication, eye contact, facial expressions, tone of voice, body posture, body intensity, all of that. It shows up here in the different nerves that we experience or that we have as part of our nervous system. So consequences of reduced interaction, the lack of real-time social engagement can trigger defense responses. So it can literally put us into a yellow sympathetic response, for example. And so they call this biological rudeness. And biological rudeness is basically going to be the client's or the person's inability to access the nerves necessary in order to show being in their green zone through their facial expressions and through their tone of voice. So once again, if your client's coming from a home that's got a lot of trauma, that's got addiction, all of this can be used as psychoeducation to say it's really hard for you to be in green if you're in an environment that's not green. When anticipated social interactions do not occur, it could lead to feelings of emotional hurt and aggressive reactions, that those with a natural disposition and those who have lived in environments of violence and fear are more likely to respond negatively. So you've got, once again, this ability to separate out, parcel out the differences. What nerves basically, once again, the vagus nerve and let's say the facial muscle nerves, how they can only be engaged in our dorsal vagal. And that when we move into sympathetic, when we move into yellow, that our facial expressions are going to shift, our tone of voice are going to shift, and we can't move them back. And that's, when we're getting into parts work or ego state work, at the end of the day, our ego states and our parts all use different sympathetic and dorsal vagal energy in order to protect the client. So when we are doing psychoeducation, like I said, I just came off a weekend of this. We're always asking and trying to get our clients to understand which polyvagal energy our parts are holding, because that's going to tell us a lot about how it is that this part is going to be able to interact with other parts. So there's a lot here. Humans have a fundamental need for this social interaction, and technology is a good conversation to have, because technology like internet and video games offers superficial social engagement, but lack the depth of face-to-face interactions. And I kind of want to take a minute to talk about this. Once again, Seth Porges, big into his video games. He has a couple pages talking about, the superficial social engagement that you can get online and how it's not enough. But I want to talk about, is it enough or not? Genuine social interactions involve nuanced facial expressions and vocal tones. And can we get that online? It's crucial for triggering the reward system, right? The co-regulated, the co-connected dorsal vagal. I'm sorry, ventral vagal shutdown. No. Ventral vagal co-regulated system. Green. That's why the traffic light works. Green. And so I think about this because I did an online training over the weekend, and this zombie face is really interesting, because how many of our participants are pretending and holding this facial expression to indicate that they are in fact paying attention when they're not. They're like doing all kinds of stuff. Maybe they're creating a PowerPoint that, we know. And so they have all of this stuff going on. So this prolonged screen time can really activate this flat expression. And digital interactions often do not fulfill our biological quota. We've got the advice, despite advancements in digital communication, nothing substitutes the health benefits and satisfaction of in-person interactions. And like I said, I want to have a conversation about this in a minute. As technology evolves, it's crucial to prioritize and maintain face-to-face contact to satisfy our deep-rooted social needs. So the question that I have, let me see here. Where's my question? Because I wrote it out in my slides. Yeah, okay, let's go back. It's right here. Okay, so the question that I have is, do you feel that so we've got our trauma clients and we have our trauma therapists, right? And one of the things that happened when we went online, and this was shocking because Andrea said to us before the pandemic, we're never doing EMDR online. And those of you that have worked with me have heard me tell the story before. And we're like, okay, all right, we get it. You're in charge. We're never going to do it online. It makes sense. And then the pandemic hit, and luckily they were like, go do the best you can, and we'll reassess after, hopefully this nightmare is over. And so what we found was that our clients that were complex clients actually felt safer in their homes. That in order for them to come out into the world, to come into our offices, that they were in their, let's say, yellow or in their red, just getting there, right? And that if they were in their homes with their cat walking across the screen and their dog right next to them and their favorite candle burning and their great drink right next to them, that they were in green. And so is it in fact not possible that we could be able to access green online more so than in person? So anyway, I wrote this question out. So do you feel that being in a familiar and safe environment like your home allows you to express yourself more genuinely compared to an in-person setting? I want you to think about that question. And then in polyvagal terms of safety and connection and activating that dorsal vagal nerve in a learning environment, does the online environment allow for and engage the participant enough for them to authentically express themselves, where it's a genuine expression for an online setting? Now, I do more than 50% of my teaching online. And when I do a breakout room, I just did this yesterday, and I have my participants there, and we're doing parts work, so their eyes are closed. And I see the client or the therapist pretending to be the client. Well, not pretending, it's real. That's what practicums are. Being the client and the facial expressions. It was this lovely therapist, and she has Spanish as her first language, and she couldn't put words to what it was that she was experiencing. But oh my gosh, you could see it in the face, and how her face was moving around, and she talked about like the smells, the memories, and her tone of voice was this, this soft and melodic, for example. And I thought, I can't get this in a hotel. Like, I'm going to do a training in Chicago in 2 weeks where I'm going to have 50 people in a hotel room at River North in Chicago. It's very exciting. It's been sold out for months. And I'm not going to be able to get that. And so part of me is like, people are always saying, do you have your trainings in person? Do you have your trainings in person? For this particular training that I did over the weekend, I honestly feel that it is better online because of this reason. So anyway, I wanted to just kind of put that out there and see what people thought. If you put some comments in the chat or you want to raise your hand, that would be awesome.
I have a cool story on this, if you wouldn't mind, Paula.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then we'll have Cynthia speak.
You bet.
Mm-hmm.
A friend of mine teaches at a very high level music school. Like, she's had one of her, and she works from 4 years old to like halftime at the Super Bowl kinds of people that she's coached. Guy that soloed with Prince.
Mm-hmm.
She said that in her online, she saw her students really accelerate. She's a violin teacher, and she saw her students really accelerate because they had to tune their own violins.
Mm.
And that's a really interesting thing, that even the young ones she had to get doing that. And that accelerated the pace of learning in the online environment. And so I think there are some things that we can require of our clients that will actually communicate to them that their environments are actually perhaps more safe than they believe. So
Mm-hmm.
get over to Cynthia because you have your hand up, but that's just a thought that I was thinking of as you were running through it. Somebody
Mm-hmm.
says some really good stuff is coming up in the chat too.
Good. All right, Cynthia.
Yeah, I was thinking about kind of the intersection of all of what we're talking about with systems of privilege and oppression, where if I am safe in the world in general, based on my societal memberships, maybe going out is safer. If I do not feel safe in the world based on my identity, how I'm treated, right, then that's not going to be the case. So you've got like, I think there's a gigantic, it depends for so many reasons, but one of the reasons was I thought about the systems of privilege and oppression. And then another thing I thought of is I work exclusively via telehealth, and almost all of my clients are in the perinatal time period. And so people are pregnant, they're having babies, they got toddlers, and they're trying to manage with not
Mhm.
enough allo parents, those extra parents, extra pairs
Mhm.
of hands, because we're so siloed in parenting. They're trying to manage all of that, and go do therapy. And so
Yeah.
the additional, I don't feel safe from, I don't have a community, I don't have a
Yeah.
village, I don't have help to get out the door or manage more childcare. It's now you've got the threat of the additional finances for I had to pay a babysitter longer, or I
Yeah.
had to inconvenience my partner to take more time off of work, or are they working from home, but they have that meeting. There's so many things that just trying to get to therapy can create a sense of I'm not safe, right?
Mhm.
So it's very complex, I think.
Yeah, no, and everything that you're bringing up is, I think, is absolutely on point to what we're talking about. And I am shocked at how well a lot of my clients are doing, and it really gives me the ability to see them wherever they are at. My college students, if they're down in the city, coming up on the train, taking the bus. I mean, it was huge issue. And so, and another thing is that when you talk about privilege, our external world was a lot safer, at least as far as I'm concerned, in my community where there's a lot of safety and privilege, than it was in the past because, I'm sorry, it was safer then than it is now, just because of all of the complexities that we have going on in the world. So, yeah, good. Eric, do you have some comments in the chat?
Yeah, I'd love for anybody to chime in, but there's a general agreement that and there's a number of just it just depends sort of, and I think that's representative of what you're saying are the trade-offs right there. Cynthia both alludes to that as well as you do too, Paula. So I don't want to out anybody. Great points is one of the statements. That's not giving away too much. An interesting thing and about younger clients and being digital natives.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of research on that about how integrated that is. I know that, kids online that are gaming often feel like more connected to those removed friendships because they feel freer so than they do.
Yeah, and gaming is as Seth was saying in the book, a lot different for that reason, as opposed to what we're talking about here. I've got, like I said, I do half of my trainings online and half of them in person. And I just every time I'm in a breakout room, and the breakout room with, I've got a bunch of screens in front of me, and I have my fireplace going, and I have my drink, and I have my phone, I'm in a good space as well from a perspective of being a teacher and being a facilitator and a coach. And just really just want to honor just some beautiful work that can be done in this environment that, like I said, I'm not going to be able to get when I go teach in a big hotel environment where I'm going to be able to see, people face to face, which will be awesome. Yeah, Mary.
Um, such an interesting question that you asked. And I attended your training this
Yeah,
weekend,
you were.
and
Mary
yeah,
was there.
um, uh, I I had I have never done a practicum online, and so one of the things during a break that I went upstairs and got an essential oil,
Mhm.
and man, did that make all the difference as far as like settling in into my peaceful place. It made and all the difference of being able to
Yeah.
actually imagine myself being there. And I don't walk around the world with my oils, um, right? But I will
Yeah.
say I did my basic training and Eric was there, and there was, where we were sitting was this conference, big conference in Tacoma, and windows all around and big high ceilings. And so like we were like in the middle, and that doesn't breed like for safety either. But
Right.
the people that I was in the group with, I do think that there is this innate ability that, all right, we're all in this train together. Let's make the best of it. And we were able to just naturally, I felt, make it work. And I felt safe enough to like truly, do the practicum.
Yeah.
And so like, I think that you can have you make the situation the best you can based on the people that you're in the group with. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, I think it's a micro level based on who you're paired up with in the energy. Not
Well,
to
and
go all
that's,
woo
yeah,
woo.
that's true too. I know that like in the hotel settings and those group settings, everybody will go out to lunch. When the coaches get back from their lunch, everybody's buzzing away, talking and sharing, stories, et cetera, et cetera. And you just don't get that online. So it's just it's a great conversation because it's a trend that's not going to change. The training, Farnsworth going on to his 80s, because that's what he talked about. He can't travel. His traveling days are over. So these trainings have to be online. But anyway, I just really appreciate the conversation. We're up against the hour. I just want to thank